All right, ladies and gentlemen, Broncos country. Let's ride. Should be live here. I do see 70 of you guys here. We'll wait till some people end up, or at least I'm able to make sure that I am live here. I'm also, or at least I was watching all the League of Legends stuff. All right, so cool. We're live there. Thank you guys for being here. As stated in yesterday's video, I'll be here for about 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes or so, kind of going over at least like the preview and stuff, and then we'll be transitioning to a paywall show for those of you that are TrueDFS subscribers to any of our packages on there. If you have access to Discord, you can find the link in the Discord over there. So first and foremost, as we go ahead and look at this race, what I want to do is actually look at the race yesterday and see how people built, and because we're entering this race with zero practice laps. Obviously Q is ran out. Obviously, if you want access to any of this stuff, you can get it through any of these packages that you have or that you see on the screen and stuff. As stated numerous times, really any of these packages, between the differences that the SaberSim offers, whether it's SaberSim Core, Ultimate, or the starter package, even with any of these things, you're basically still getting 3 sites in one. You still have pay dirt, analytic tools, you still have all of our stuff, and you still have SaberSim in whatever form you end up getting. I mean, you're basically getting 3 sites in one or 3 sites in one for any of these packages. We're going to take a gander and look at the contest review here and stuff as I go ahead and look at the lordy. As we go ahead and look at the contest yesterday, which yet again, this is how you can use this tool. Saves you a ton of time. You don't have to, sit in an Excel sheet or Google sheet, building formulas and stuff for this to just for you to even get this data or for you to manually go in and get this stuff. Anyway, the reason why I'm loading this is because we have a real chance, and I just keep finding that people keep forgetting to update lineups and stuff. The more I see this, but what I'm really wanting to look at is or at least my breakdown of this. I spelled that wrong. Because today's grid is very, very similar. When we look at, yesterday's race at Texas and the high likelihood that we would end up wrecking stuff, okay, and you look at how I built here. Now, obviously, we ran into issues with Stuart Friesen wrecking at the end of the race and stuff. So obviously, that throws a massive wrench and everything. But I did finish like 14th or something in the main GPP and stuff. But this is how I approached it. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because this race was very much a plate race, outside of your lap leader of Corey Heim, and then, whether it be Ankrum or Hemrick scraping off fast laps and laps led and stuff, the majority of your lineup outside of Corey Heim came from the back of the field. When we're looking at today's, starting grid and stuff, we're in a very similar situation, which I would look at with a lot more risk. Like, just for example, with the people that we're looking, like Corey Day and William Sawalish, these guys have performed so horrible isn't even an accurate word to describe how bad these drivers have been at performing in equipment that is top 12 speed. Okay. So the fact that you get them starting, dead last today at 73 and 77, I mean, I would play them. Okay. With everything that we saw at Texas, both yesterday and today, when I look at where the field was, and when I'm really wanted to look at like where did the field go in ownership for these guys. If you were a part of the paywall show, I broke down exactly why I came in at 45% underweight on Corey Heim versus the field, despite the fact that he was showing up as the most optimal. And when you look at the lineups that I played him with, outside of Freeze and Wrecking and stuff, nearly, and it really came down to 1v1s between Crafton getting a speeding penalty or improper fueling, Stuart Friesen crashing late in the race and stuff. But all of these Corey Heim lineups were pretty much flip-flopping between the optimal lineup yesterday. When we're looking at where else the field went, You know, if somebody looks good in this race for Xfinity at Texas, okay, why do they look good? Well, it's a potential situation of them being cars or being a driver who has shown, potential top 10, top 12, top 15 speed, okay? When we're looking at where ownership came in yesterday and why I was overweight on certain drivers, as I said, I went through it in the Paywall show in more excruciating detail. Um, but this was good. This slate was going to end up being a 1v1 type of slate, right? The reason why I'm looking at this and I'm looking at duplications is despite the fact that the race was so chalky, I was able to not have a lot of duplications, and that was due to the fact that I was using one-offs or using guys who weren't as highly owned compared to the field. Mainly Luke was a main guy that I was trying to be overweight on, especially with the field. Um, really centering around Matt Mills and Parsons and stuff. Anyway, the reason why I'm going over that is because today's slate, and obviously, I mean, we or you can go through it and see how people did. Obviously, I've talked about this ad nauseum and stuff. Anyway, when we're looking at the Xfinity series today, the fact that Larson got thrown in, well deep into the week after salaries were out. Okay, Schroeder mentioned this on Twitter, on his Speed Geeks handle, but the fact that um, Larson was thrown in here late. Typically, whenever Larson is in the race, you then, or at least that you then, as in DraftKings, then has to adjust the salaries for the remainder of the field. Otherwise, you're going to have 17,000 guys at like 10K and stuff. But when we're looking at where everybody's at, the fact that you have Allgaier, Larson, Mayer, Jesse Love, and Austin Hill all in the 5K range with the 12.5 in here, and then the rest of the salary being extremely, extremely tight in terms of salary and stuff. This leads to situations to where there's a potential for having a lot of lineups that go very similar, and so you know at least what I'm going to try and do is take the lower own of a lot of 1v1s in those situations and stuff. We're also looking at if we go through and look at the Xfinity dashboard that Astuka's pushed together, which yet again these are things you can go through in your own detail. Maybe you can't read these as well right now, or you want to look at stuff in more detail and everything like that. You can go ahead and get any of the TrueDFS packages to go ahead and do this. But when we look at these races specifically here, okay, we look at the last 6 races, okay? Obviously, we did not have qualifying for the 2 races in 2021. We did have qualifying for the other races. So we could say or use or look at, how did this race or how did this track perform in 2020 and 2021? What were the amount of cars on lead lap? What was the amount of cars taken out in wrecks? How many yellows did we have? Okay. When we look here and we look at these yellows, okay, we've been pretty consistent, 10, 10, 11, 9, 12, and 7, okay? Obviously, we have 3 right off the bat today with the competition caution in the 2 stages, so that's 3 right off the bat, okay? We look at the amount of green flag laps, okay? We're really pressed to really surpass 150, okay? So we have to factor that into the amount of fast lap points available. We then look at the amount of cars left on the lead lap at the end of this race. We have 26, 19, 24, 8, 15, 25. Okay. Crash DNFs 8, 4, 8, 14, 10, and 1. And then mechanical DNFs 2, 4, 2, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. So, similar to the truck series yesterday, which heavily leaned into kind of like an older truck series at Texas. And older, I mean, like what they used to do like 2, 3 years ago, where they used to just like wreck the fucking shit out of people, right? They would just tear stuff up. It was like a plate race, okay? With no practice, with how talented this field is, okay? I would lean very much to building the exact same way that I built yesterday and approaching the contest in a very similar fashion, okay? Now, we don't exactly have, like, 4, like, flat out locks in the back of the field today, okay? But the fact that we have Larson starting 20th, okay? The fact that we have Riley Herbst, in the 20s as well. We have Ryan Sieg, And then yet again, those multiple 7K guys, when we're looking at projections and where Larson's coming in at, where all these other guys are coming in at, we're really down to a pretty limited type of um, a really tight player pool. Okay, yet again, we look at the points distribution for this race, okay? And so if we're aiming to at least try and get top 10 scores, what do we need in this situation here? Obviously, we're not really concerned about the highest score on the slate because that'll like not obvious, but like race winner, main lap leader, whatever. Like we don't need to really focus on that aspect. We need to focus on where the rest of the field is coming in at. So on average, the seventh highest driver in terms of DraftKings points in this race is scoring 45 points. Eighth is 43, ninth is 41, 10th is 40.88. Okay, and so when we're looking at a baseline of, hey, we need to be scoring 40 points on a DraftKings slate on this contest, on your driver, whatever the case may be, this is a pretty limited field. Okay, yet again, very similar to yesterday. Now, I already got excited of it. Does that mean that like Catherine Legg, Joey Gase, Garrett Smithley are in play? I don't think so. Kind of working backwards to yesterday, we look at well, here, let me get where's my phone at? Where is my phone, dude? Well, that's not what I wanted to do. Oh man. Okay, so I'll get on this one. I was just going to get my phone to look at it, but I guess we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. Yet again, the main job or thing that we're fixing or answering or problem solving with the contest review is not having to do this, but just because we're here, we're going to do this. So where did the lower owned guys who started in the back of the field score? You had Nathan Beard, 33, Spencer, 29. You had Cody Dennison, who for some fucking reason, Sabersim had this motherfucker like projected like this well. That was ludicrous. That was so bad that like that's ridiculous. Like the fact that they sent out flat out, they're like, yeah, Cody's gonna project for like 28 points. That's fucking ridiculous, dude. That's kind of a. And then of course he ends up smashing at 36 for him and Ream. But the main thing being is yet again you did not see these guys in the optimal lineup nor in the winning lineup because they are still capped in the 30s and stuff. Very similar to a plate race. If you start a bum starting 37th and they finish 20th, 19th, that's good, but you're still not eclipsing that barrier of entry of like 42, 43, 45 points that you need. Okay, so yes, even though today's race, Smithley, Gase, Catherine, let's say for example, we do get Carnage, which yet again, I think we certainly lean towards at least 5 or 6 yellows on a baseline of where these guys are at. Okay, these guys still aren't in play. Okay, so you then go to somebody like William Sawalich, somebody like Parker Retzloff, Corey Day. When we're looking at where these guys have been performing in these races, okay, you look at William, who has just been yet again atrocious here of where he's been at in speed in a Joe Gibbs car, right? But he's 73. It's like, would you play Dean Thompson? Would you play Chris Wright? Would you play, these Jack Wood, the drivers in those situations at that price tag? Like, I think from a leverage point of view, I think you have to play them. I think that's probably the smart move there. Obviously, Cordier hasn't ran Vegas, Homestead, and Darlington, but he's starting 77th, and he's still, apparently, second to only Christ in what people think he is in terms of racing and stuff. We then look at Ryan Sieg from 30th, on average a top 15 car. We then look at Josh Williams. Actually, I could have put. We look at where Josh Williams is, 66, okay? Yeah, obviously, Riley Herbst hasn't been in the car since last year, but he's at 94 in a Joe Gibbs car, in the car that Eric Marola has been over excelling at, okay? You then look at Sammy Smith, where Sammy Smith is at. You then look at Eckes, where he's at, so on and so forth. Obviously, Larson is, starting 20th and stuff. I think you're building very similar to to yesterday and stuff like that. I'm gonna go ahead and see if anybody else is saying anything right now. What's going on, Miami? Happy to see you, and I hope you're doing well as well. Um, Taylor Gray starting 12th at 84. I have personally not gotten to a ton of Taylor Gray at the moment, but let me see. And for the record, I have Taylor Gray at projected for 43.8 points today. Um, if that helps you or not, like that is a 5-2 value, but I'm not specifically getting to Taylor Gray at this moment. That's pretty much it. I think we will go ahead and transition to the paywall show. For those of you who weren't in there, we were specifically. I guess I can go ahead and at least give you a heads up of what we were doing yesterday, or not a heads up, but like what is it, dude? What is it, dude? What am I trying to say here? So what we're specifically doing in the paywall shows is obviously diving way more into what's making my projections, how I'm building specifically, comparing what different builds are getting, specifically speaking about lineup construction and what the field is going to do, how to get different, so on and so forth, and stuff like that. And not only with my projections, but with what SaberSim is doing in order to find what are going to be popular lineups. Obviously, answering any questions that anybody might have, but it's a much more in-depth thing. And obviously, I go through and I mean, we're talking about lineups, how they work out and whatnot. And most of the discussions that I'm having here are based specifically off of the lineups that I'm specifically playing. So if you want any additional help or insight or stuff like that, you can go ahead and join us in the paywall show at this time. You'll find a link in Discord, and I will see you guys later for the Cup Series race tomorrow, where we'll be doing the same thing. And then obviously we'll be slowly transitioning to having the entirety of these shows be behind the paywall, probably about around mid May. So I will see you guys later tomorrow. See ya. And I'll see you guys in the payroll show.